Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to WatchBox, and thanks for logging on. It's that time again. We are waking up with watches this weekend. Everything you see here is for sale. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com to buy any watch on this show. And remember, names, references, and prices when available are in the description below. Also remember, we are buying, stocking up for the holidays, and we are now in the home stretch, paying our highest prices of the year. One watch or a full collection, no upper limit on value paid. Remember, that's tmosso at thewatchbox.com to reach out. Let's get started right away with a big piece. This was probably the best new Patek Philippe of 2019. There were many appealing options, many attractive models, but for all-around appeal in terms of its thin profile, its water resistance, automatic winding, fine finish, plenty of lume, and a great model line name, it's the Aquanaut 5168G, the 010 in khaki green. The watch is beautiful. Now, it uses the 42.2mm case that we first saw back in 2017 with a blue dial. This one works better as a sports watch. It looks a little bit more rugged. It looks a little bit more, shall we say, adventurous. It's got an ambiance of military daring-do to it, even as it respects the standards of Patek Philippe and Haute Horlogerie, the timepiece. 8.5 millimeters thick and still 120 meters water resistant with a screw-down crown. White gold hands, white gold indices, white gold numerals, plenty of lume here, and of course you can see through the reverse side. Caliber 324 in its latest iteration, ceramic bearings, silicone anti-magnetic hairspring, 6-position adjustment, free sprung, and of course a 45-hour power reserve. It is nicely executed. You can see those bevels and the jewel and the screw sinks. You can also see on the edge of the bridges the movement lighting up as it is nicely beveled and handsomely chamfered with engine turning at the center of the rotor. Also on the base plate, black polished screw heads with chamfered slots, and all of that guaranteed to run no worse than -3 + 2 seconds per 24 hours from the Patek Philippe factory. On my wrist, you can see it wears differently than the 5167. It's a larger watch, broader, but just as thin, which means it looks almost pancake flat. It is lovely and versatile, and we're going to do a lume shot here. This is a beautifully handmade sports watch that gives up nothing to the rivals from the Overseas line and the Royal Oaks. And we're back with the Aquanaut khaki green. It's green by night, albeit a brighter green in Luminova. Remember, your standard Royal Oak is going to be 50 meters. This is 120, Advantage Patek Philippe. Now we're going to take a look at two different Rolex models. These were launched, respectively, in 2013 and 2017. Now, when this watch first came out, it was a bit of a revelation. Not that anyone was asking for a black and blue bezel, but Rolex nailed it. The look was perfect. A first ever color combination with a matching lovely blue varnish 24-hour hand. It immediately gained a host of nicknames. The black and blue, the Dark Knight, the Batman, and this model discontinued as of last year in favor of a model with a Jubilee bracelet. It's the one that collectors seem to prefer. The new model has earned the appellation Batgirl. This is the Batman. Should it make a difference? It shouldn't, but all the same, people do pretend that this model is a little bit more masculine, a little bit more rough and ready because of the Oyster bracelet. Now, I'm not going to opine on that, but I am going to say it's a no longer available combination of the black and blue bezel with the Oyster bracelet, and it does change the character of the watch. 100 meters water resistant, automatic winding, plenty of lume, 2, and if you set it correctly, up to 3 time zones. It has a ceramic bezel insert, so highly scratch resistant, and it's really flat, sitting easily underneath the cuff. Now, as thin and fine as that is, it's still no match for the Daytona, which at 12.2 millimeters thick will easily fit underneath the cuff. The Daytona is a gorgeous watch, and in 2017, we received a new variant, the Daytona 3, in fact, all precious metal, white gold, yellow gold, and red gold, and this is red gold, Rolex Everose. It has a very high copper percentage, which is where you get the redness. This would be known as 5N gold. Now, taking a quick look at this watch on the wrist, it's 40 millimeters, like the GMT, but it has a very different case profile. You can see it's a little bit more curvaceous. The lugs aren't as squared off. The case flank isn't sheer. It has a little bit of a rounded top-to-bottom curve to it. The bezel is ceramic, non-mobile, as is the way with the GMT. or I should say the Daytona. The GMT has the mobile bezel with a ceramic insert. This one you can see has a full ceramic bezel, which means that no part of it can scratch or scuff, and it has rose gold deposits for the characters in the bezel. Center registers with an azurage or concentric guilloche, a lovely metallic effect that scatters the light. Inside the case, which is 100 meters water resistant, just like the GMT, you have a 3-day power reserve Rolex manufactured caliber 4130. Launched back in 2000, it was the first Rolex movement that really paid attention to extending the power reserve beyond 2 days. And also, it was the first Rolex movement to really consider finishing standards. Though you can't see it, it looks really nice. It uses a rotor bearing too, which makes it more shock resistant, and the vertical clutch and column wheel tandem mean that it is crisp to actuate the chronograph, and then the vertical clutch ensures that there is no jump or stagger to the chronograph seconds hand. Also, with the vertical clutch, you can just leave the chronograph running and there's no hazard to the watch. The Oysterflex strap bracelet. I say strap bracelet because there's a metal band that connects this to the clasp. It's inside the rubber sheath, so you can't cut this. On that basis, it's not a strap, it's more like a sheathed bracelet. There is a bellows system on the underside that cinches the strap down onto your wrist, so you'll get a good fit. There are several Oysterflex strap sizes too, but that little bellows system gets you the rest of the way. There's also an Easy Link system, 5 millimeters of tool-free adjustment built into the clasp, and as you can see, several different restationing slots inside of the clasp, so you can adjust this one size-wise. Now, let's say you don't want to spend a lot of money. Let's say you want to spend somewhere around $2,500 or less, and you want complications from a great brand, and a great brand is Longines, a company that has possibly the best museum and archive department, and is easily, among the swatch brands, the one most in touch with its history. But the watch you see here is historically inspired. It's not a re-edition, rather it's a wonderful exercise in maximum complication for your dollar. Stainless steel and 40 millimeters, this is the Master Complete Calendar, which is exactly that. It is a complete calendar, but it's more than that. It has a 24-hour sub-register, and I'll demonstrate how this works. That's the quick set system that you can use for setting the date as well as the month. Pull out the crown all the way and you hack the seconds, and now you can see that 24-hour second register, which is coaxial with the constant seconds over at 9 o'clock. You have a mono counter with chronograph hours and the moon phase, and then you have chronograph minutes up at the top with the day and the month. There is a lunette style date indicator. The watch is not just an automatic complete calendar chronograph, AM, PM, and moon phase. It also has caliber L687. Now, this is based distantly on the Valjoux 7751 architecture, but you can see one big upgrade has been the switch from a cam-based chronograph to a column wheel. So you get that crispness that I mentioned with the Daytona. It's the more expensive way to make a chronograph because it's harder to tune, but it's the more premium way to build a chronograph. Now, there's more than meets the eye here, because whereas a standard 7750 has a 42-hour power reserve, this one has been upgraded to 54. So you're getting everything you see on this dial, plus automatic winding, plus a column wheel, plus a 54-hour power reserve. Now, you can see on the wrist, it's got a nice presence, striking, nicely proportioned, a handsome, versatile watch that could be your dress watch, or even a little bit of a sporty watch. This is a timepiece that can wear on a broad range of wrists. As I can see you wearing this watch on a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. You can also see that Longines didn't short you the accessories, as instead of cheaper calfskin here, you get alligator leather with a nice contrasting stitch and a full deployant clasp rather than a pin buckle. So Longines offering an outstanding proposition right here. This is not our only Longines on the show today. I'm actually gonna go grab another one right now. This is probably the best known watch in the current Longines catalog. Originally launched back in 2007, this is the Legend Diver. Based on the vintage reference 7042, it's a 42 millimeter stainless steel dive watch. And as you can see, it has the same caseback imagery as the original 7042. And this model, which you'll appreciate in spite of its vintage cues, is 300 meters water resistant. It recaps the original's super compressor case design. Irvin Piquerez was a company that built a case with a remarkable water-resistant hermeticity and, in general, an internal rotating bezel. It was used on many watches from many brands: Longines, Vulcain, Jaeger-LeCoultre, IWC, and many, many more. But the Longines, the JLC, and the Vulcain were probably the best remembered, and thus the ones that modern collectors would most like to wear. This watch has an upgraded movement. The standard ETA bases have been hot-rodded for Longines applications, and so it has a 64-hour power reserve instead of the standard ETA movement's 38. So you're getting a lot of value here in terms of power reserve. It's a lot more than you expect for this price point. And this is a watch that you can expect to buy for around $1,500, so the price is right. 42 millimeters in steel. You can see it's faithful to the original in the minimally beveled lugs, the squared off lug design, the thin mid case, the bubble-like sapphire designed to evoke a plexiglass from the 60s, and then the quadrille or quartered imprint on the crowns. So this is a very faithful tribute to history, and it's a watch that wears surprisingly substantial. Given its vintage inspiration, it has a lot of wrist presence, and much of that comes down to those lugs. So this is a watch that offers real diving capability, but also a lot of timeless vintage nostalgia and mystique, as this will look just as good come the 2060s. All right, we're flying. Like I said, I may have over-programmed today's show, so forgive me for that. We have a lot of watches to address, and two from Jaeger-LeCoultre, La Grande Maison of the Vallée du Jeu, the watchmaker's watchmaker. And this is perhaps the greatest watch from the watchmaker's watchmaker. JLC was famous for providing movements to other brands, but the 1930s witnessed a change from the previous LeCoultre company to Jaeger-LeCoultre, and the Reverso was actually the basis for that eventual union, as the company created to distribute the Reverso became the modern-day Jaeger-LeCoultre. So why then is there neither Jaeger nor LeCoultre branding on the Reverso Rouge? Well, this stainless steel limited edition, or I should say properly boutique edition, it wasn't limited, but it was limited by single model year availability and boutique retail. But this special edition features a dial that says only Reverso, because the original Reverso was actually subcontracted by LeCoultre to Jaeger, who in turn subcontracted it to a French engineer who designed the original rotating case. Now, originally, the case was made by Wenger, and the movement was made by Tavannes, and LeCoultre and Jaeger were just coordinating the design of the parts and the final assembly, which is why originally it said only Reverso on the dial back in 1931. Well, that changed with time, and this watch has both a Jaeger-LeCoultre case and movement. The original minimally adorned dial has become a classic, and an example from the Heritage Gallery, the JLC Factory Museum, features a lush red lacquer and Reverso dial signage. And this watch doesn't just pay tribute to that original, it surpasses the original. And you can see the watch, less than 8 millimeters thick, truly is ultra thin, disappearing on the wrist. It's a broad but wearable watch. I'd recommend it for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. And of course, the original Reverso was designed to protect the crystal from blows during sports use. So the idea was a solid steel case back, and then back in those days when the crystal would have been made of glass, you could turn the watch around to view the time, and then for rough and tumble activities, you could flip it and present the redoubtable stainless steel case back to the mallets of, say, polo play. Now here's the other thing. It's a canvas for customization, engraving, lacquer, enamel. That has traditionally been the ultimate disposal of the reverse side of the Reverso. Now you can also fool your friends at lunch or at dinner into all sorts of cockamamie proposals regarding what might be on your wrist and keep them guessing. This is a watch that defies most people's expectations for wristwatch architecture, and when rotated to its steel side, it creates all sorts of puzzlement and, yes, interest, which might be the ultimate mark of true value, as this is a watch that can mint new watch enthusiasts by virtue of the curiosity it engenders. Now let's take a quick look at a watch that represents the other important thread of JLC history. If the company's known for two things, it's the Reverso and the Memovox wrist alarm, but this 44mm 150-piece platinum limited edition, the Amvox R Alarm, goes beyond simple alarm architecture. It is a fusion of Aston Martin and Jaeger-LeCoultre design cues. Let me explain. There was a Jaeger and there was a LeCoultre. I mentioned that before in the story of the Reverso. Jaeger would ultimately become the instrument brand of the merged Jaeger-LeCoultre company. And Jaeger speedometers, clocks, tachometers found their way into Aston Martin cars starting in the 1920s and continuing through the 1990s. So this watch, part of the Amvox series, pays tribute to that joint heritage of Jaeger and Aston Martin. So there's a lot going on here. First, you can see the three crowns. The super compressor case built by Irvin Piquerez for Jaeger-LeCoultre featured three crowns because it had the internal rotating bezel in the middle, and then it had one crown for the time and one crown for winding and setting the alarm. So this is a tribute to both that Aston Martin connection as well as the Polaris 1968 diving alarm, which used the same super compressor case as the Longines, but with one extra crown for the alarm. So this is both a Polaris tribute and an Aston Martin tribute. You can see that the Calypso-style hands, contentious, but JLC asserts important part of the Polaris 68 heritage, but then more clearly you can see the three crowns, the box section sapphire designed to evoke the original plexiglass. You can see the lug form is exactly that, and the case band shape exactly that of the Polaris 68. You can see that there is a bolt-fixed platinum individual numbering plate on the flank. You can see that the crowns, of course, are exactly as on the original, and then you can see that the font used is also that used on the Polaris, and it does have that internal rotating bezel. The Aston Martin cues include the specific calibration of the dial. You can see how the bottom is left empty. That's because on a tachometer or a speedometer in a car, the needle never traverses the underside. You can also see that there's a bit of a grid. The Memovox disc at the center has an inverse hobnail pattern, and that's designed to evoke the mesh grille, the grid grille of David Brown era Aston Martin cars. I'm going to do my best here to see if the alarm is wound. Try to set it off. It will ring longer, but for our purposes, you get a good sense of how that caliber 918 automatic alarm sounds. You can also see on the reverse side, there's another Aston Martin dedication, and whereas the original Polaris featured 16 perforations on its resonator caseback, this one, just to be different, features 14. But again, another design cue evoking the Polaris. I actually prefer this watch to the ultimate JLC tribute to Polaris and the subsequent Polaris Memovox models, and to be honest, the feel of this in platinum surpasses the experience of all three. This is truly a rich watch that represents the best of JLC. Let's discuss two things that have nothing in common other than the fact that they are round, tell time, and hail from independent brands. First, with FP Journe. Of course, FP Journe's two best-known horological innovations are the tourbillon remontoir and a model that was launched 1 year later in 2000, the Chronomet Resins. And this is a Res 1, symmetrical 12-12 dial, white gold, gray matte, 38 millimeters in platinum, and you can see it is brass movement. I also like to call out the fact that these early cases were built in France by Eleanor, FP Journe's original case supplier. So you can see the Eleanor maker's mark, as well as the French hallmarks to go along with the Swiss hallmarks. You can also see this is something that was discontinued in roughly mid-2005. The stamping of the case back with the year of the case's manufacturer. So you can see that's 04, meaning this would have been one of the very last of the brass movement resonance watches, as subsequently the movement was adapted to use rose gold bridges and plates. Here we have rhodium coated brass. The barrel bridge also changed distinctly to hide the ratchet wheels and the clicks. Most folks prefer the original brass movement caseback. The market undoubtedly prefers the brass movement because it is scarcer than the subsequent rose gold. And then the market also prefers the Resonance 1 and 2 dial, which was balanced with a 12-12 register. Later on, it was made asymmetrical, which was aesthetically not as pleasing, maybe better as a travel watch, but aesthetics come first when choosing a timepiece. Now, these are considered to be vintage Journe, even though if you count back, you realize this is a 16-year-old watch. All the same, this is considered vintage because it is distinctly unlike what came after, and it was a period during which FP Journe as a company, Montre Journe, built far fewer watches than its present day, roughly 900 per year. Now, because it does take a little while for the resonance effect to couple the two independent sides of the movement, there's a flyback trigger that allows you to synchronize the seconds hands after 7 to 10 minutes. That's about how long it takes for resonance to take purchase on these two movements. You could set both of these dials independently using the bullhead crown. There is a 42-hour power reserve with a power reserve indicator, and it works backwards like the power reserve indicator on a marine chronometer. So when it is fully wound, it indicates 0, as in 0 hours since you have wound the watch. The two sides are independent: barrel, train, escapement, and balance. They're not physically connected. There's a small rack and pinion at center, and the watchmaker uses that rack and pinion to fine-tune the distance between the two balances. As with pendulums or metronomes placed in proximity, watch balances will self-synchronize if properly regulated. The result being that if one side starts to deviate for any reason, the other side, which is bound to it by resonance, will auto-correct. And that is the idea behind the Chronomet Alizan, a horological world premiere from F.P. Journe and one of his signature pieces. This is one of the rarest, most aesthetically pleasing and collectible of the resonance watches. Now, fast forward to 2015, and Zenspezialuran of Frankfurt, Germany, created a watch that was different for them, as they're generally known for robust pilot's watches and diving watches. So the 43mm Zinn 1800S Damazehner was a break with their precedent. Somewhere between a dress watch and a sports watch, it features ultra-hard, hard black coating on top of tegimented carbon-diffused steel, meaning it's a super hard, scratch-resistant coating on a super hard steel base. So when you hit it, you can't eggshell the hard black by compressing the soft metal beneath. Zinn only uses hard black on tegimented steel so that the steel below can never collapse, thus never resulting in the eggshell delamination that typically afflicts hard black coated watches. And you can see it's broad and it's flat like a dress watch with a simple symmetrical dial, and the Damascus steel that's used is in the fashion of vintage Damascus steel, and by that I mean the classical period Damascus steel. The pattern's actually created by innumerable folds in the steel, folding it again and again to create what appears almost like the grain on a tree. What's distinct about this watch is that the case, the bezel, and the dial are all fabricated as one piece. So the grain runs continuously from the case over the bezel onto the dial. They are one monoblock of Damascus steel. Now, it's 100 meters water resistant and quite scarce, as you can see on the case back, which is also Damascus steel. This is number 92 of 100, so extremely scarce. You can swim with it, it's automatic, it's fully loomed, it's a fantastic watch that is a sports watch, but at the same time has a sixth gear that your average Zinn does not have, as it is viable with a long sleeve, a tight cuff, and dress attire. It is truly a gorgeous watch, immensely striking without being bombastic, without being excessively thick or excessively expensive, and it's a wonderful sub-$6,000 way to get into a truly great independent brand and one of its most distinctive and scarce models. I have two blue dial chronographs, and this is not what you think it is. Take a quick look at that dial. That's right, Zinn fans. This ain't no Breitling. This is the 903. In the late 1970s, as the original Willy Breitling-controlled Breitling firm was failing, parts, patents, and licensing rights were sold off, and Helmut Zinn of Frankfurt, the man whose name was blazoned on that last 1800S Damazehner, he purchased an enormous stockpile of Breitling parts, and as a pilot and a pilot's watch manufacturer, he began assembling his own Zinn-branded Navitimers, which means you get a chronograph and you get the circular slide rule. Now, what's fascinating about this watch is that the circular slide rule is driven by a geared pinion, and there's a very low gearing ratio that makes for super precise setting bidirectionally for calculations using that circular slide rule. Now, you can use it for multiplication or division, and you can see it's also calibrated, as the Navitimer is, with various different units as well as various different statistical measures that are used for gauging ground speed, airspeed, fuel consumption, rate of climb, drift, All of this can be calculated using the circular slide rule, which is a logarithmic scale in circular form. Now, the other thing that's fascinating here is that this is a 903 that's a tribute to those original Zinn 903s with a sort of photina dial that gives it nice warm tones complementary to the black and the silver dominant features, but it's also 100 meters water resistant, which sets it well apart from the Navitimers. The Navitimers are splash only 30 meters. This is 100 with a screw down crown, which makes it viable as a full service sports watch. And if you throw it on a water resistant band, you could absolutely swim with it. Inside is a top grade Sellita SW510 adjusted in-house by Zinn. And at 40 millimeters, it is a perfect size. Unlike so many of the Navitimers, this is designed for normal human wrist. You don't have to be a big pilot to wear this watch. This is a timepiece that looks great. It wears easy, it wears compact, it has a classical stance and ambiance about it. Although it's not a vintage watch and thus doesn't come with any provenance, condition, or water resistance questions, it looks like a vintage watch, and it's a tribute to the real history that is shared between Zinn and Breitling in the Navitimer and Navitimer alike style genre. This is a timepiece that represents Zinn as much as Breitling, and a period during which Breitling was out of business and latterly focusing on quartz. Zinn was still forging ahead with the original Navitimer. All right, let's talk about independent horology. Let's talk about two independent brand watches with green dials. First in precedence, because it was the first watch to come out of these two, and I haven't forgotten about that El Primero, that's coming back, but this is the 42mm white gold H. Moser & C Endeavor Flying Hours Cosmic Green with a Cosmic Green Fume Fade. It features a special variation on the traditional Wandering Hours, and as the Flying Hours Sapphire Minutes disc flies above the hours themselves, they change in sequence, so it is effectively both flying hour and a jump hour all in one. Now the case is beautifully sculpted, as the Moser Endeavor cases tend to be, a bezel that waxes and wanes in thickness with a concave profile, black polished, scalloped hollows, and on the reverse side, Moser's own movement, HMC 200, 3-day power reserve, automatic winding with a bidirectional magic lever style system, a 100-piece limited edition. This followed the limited edition of 2018, which was a blue dial. The green is more lively. I've seen them both. It's a full balance bridge with a free sprung index, so that full balance bridge and free sprung index, the same architecture used in the Pioneer sports watch. So not only is this a robust look, but it is physically and mechanically robust internally. A tough watch, an automatic winder with a unique complication, but not too thick, as you can see on my wrist, and a very special piece from Moser, the Endeavor Flying Hour. I want to say it only exists in 160 pieces. I think the original version in blue was 60 pieces and this was 100. So it is scarce by any measure, even by the standards of a company that only makes 1,500 watches a year. So you're talking about a rare watch from a company that builds rare watches. It's a wonderful piece and distinctively quirky in the way Moser watches tend to be, especially with that fume fade and the cosmic green color. Their term, not mine. Now jumping real quick to a watch that is equally quirky, perhaps even more so, here we have the Resins Type 1 Slim X. 42 millimeters in grade 5 titanium. This is part of a series of 40 watches made in the Type 1 Slim series. The Type 1 Slim X features an olive green metallic dial, and then it is a regulator. This Resins is an uncommon watch in that it splits the hours, the minutes, and the seconds in an unusual fashion. It also has a day of the week indicator, and it carries over a feature that originally arrived on the Type 1 Squared, a lever that allows you to wind the watch and set the watch via its case back. So, for example, let's take a look right here. You are looking right now at 5, and you were looking at 5. Now you are looking at, we'll do this again, 6. And you were looking at 6. Is this 6 in the morning or is it 6 in the evening? Well, because the day of the week indicator moves in clockwise direction, you can see obviously Saturday, Sunday, those hollow arcs. You can see we're in the first half of the first solid arc of the week, so we know we are looking at 6 a.m., 6 in the morning on a Monday. The watch has a Resins orbital convex system with over 100 parts and 15 jewels on top of an ETA 2892 automatic base. So it is an automatic watch, but it has a movement on top of a movement with a lot of original watchmaking. The whole thing is only 10.9 millimeters thick, and when you throw it on the wrist, it wears like a second skin. Super slim, super light, all in titanium and sapphire, and then it is remarkably well loomed, and I'm going to demonstrate that right now. And here you can see the loom of the Resins. You might not think of Resins loom as industry leading, but truthfully it is, as everything, right down to the Resins hand logo at 12 o'clock, is fully lit. Now, I teased this watch a few moments ago. Let's bring it back. Let me get my lights all back online. Let there be light. This is the Zenith Chronomaster El Primero, 36,000 vibrations per hour, 42 millimeters in stainless steel. This is probably my favorite recent Zenith. For sheer aesthetic balance, it doesn't come much better. The heritage-inspired dial, which is vintage 1969, with the addition of the blue metallic elements usually reserved for the Shaw Ramo limited editions. It features a beautiful Chronomaster-style case that's neither vintage nor ultra-modern, and perhaps a little bit more, shall we say, traditional compared to the geometrically faceted Dayfi cases. This watch will never be mistaken for a Tag Heuer or an Hublot. Now, it's also remarkably versatile. As you can see from the case back, the watch is 100 meters water resistant, meaning there's a lot of versatility here. Automatic winding, 100 meters water resistant, fully loomed. You can wear this watch full time, and if you're looking to buy a truly special watch for someone as a gift, as a just one watch for life, or as a milestone watch for great accomplishment, or perhaps a life landmark, this is the way to go. The 36,000 vibration per hour, 50-hour power reserve column wheel El Primero movement inside this watch is an all-time great. As you can see, the movement with visible lateral clutch and blued column wheel is one of the best looking automatic chronograph movements you will ever find. Most automatic chronograph movements are ugly. The El Primero, which is historically significant, is also a great looking movement. You can see everything. The El Primero, remember, back in 1969, the world's first integrated automatic high-beat chronograph caliber, racing Hamilton, Buren, Breitling, and of course Seiko for the honor of being the first automatic chrono. Were they first? It was a dead heat between the three, but there's no doubt that combining those three features, high-beat, automatic, and integrated construction, the El Primero was the first, and in my heart, it will always be my favorite. Two different forms of yellow metal, only one of which is gold. Let's start with the Omega Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch Apollo 17 45th anniversary. So this watch came out in 2017, and it's a standard 42 millimeter moonwatch, but that's just about where the standard elements end. It is a tribute to Jane Cernan, and you can see there's a lot to love. First, take note of the tachymeter bezel. The base is 45 rather than 500. 45 years since Apollo 17. 0534 GMT, that is the time, Greenwich Mean Time, that Gene Cernan walked up into the lunar module, becoming the last man to stand on the moon. Just below that, zirconium oxide, the material from which the dial is crafted. The dial is ceramic, the bezel insert is ceramic, and you can see that there is a golden image of Apollo, as well as the Apollo 17 notation adjacent. You can see he's sort of staring at the numeral 17. You'll also appreciate that, like many lauded late 60s and early 70s Omega chronographs, this one features a racing dial, which is a sort of staggered checker pattern that runs the circumference of the dial, a little bit like the checkered flag you would see at the conclusion of an automotive race. Now, there is more going on here. You have a white gold medallion on the back with the image of the Apollo 17 mission patch. So you have the American Eagle, you have the God Apollo, you have the Cosmos and the Moon, and of course you have a tribute to Eugene Cernan. This is a very limited edition. There was another one in steel, this one in yellow gold, 272 pieces, far more exclusive. and a rare feature for a moonwatch, a full gold clasp. Internally, it is the moonwatch caliber 1861, which still flies with NASA today, so it's got the heart of a modern-day space watch. And of course, the timepiece is very substantial, with a solid case back, a massive gold construction, and if you look carefully, you can see that that is a bubble-like sapphire, not the Moonwatch Edition Hesselite. So this has the sapphire, it will not scratch as easily as the traditional thermoplastic. You get a good sense of the watch on the wrist, and I can attest to its solidity. Now, this is not a gold watch, but it is a golden watch. This is the de Bethune DB28 Yellow Tones, a special edition launched in 2019. It takes the oxidation process that de Bethune originally patented for bluing grade 5 titanium, and by applying the heat for a shorter period of time, de Bethune was able to create this uniform golden tone on the grade 5 titanium. So it is a yellow gold oxidized color, not actual precious metal. The other headline here is that unlike almost every other company that coats metal, de Bethune can restore it. If you scratch it, scuff it, or wear it off, it goes right back on. They fire it again when it returns to the factory. Spring-loaded floating lugs, the watch is 42.7 millimeters in diameter and just over 11 millimeters thick, so it's super slim and super light. And you have these lovely spring-loaded floating lugs that helped the original DB28 to win the GPHG Eggy Doll back in 2011. So it won the Best Picture at the Oscars of Watchmaking, and it's been upgraded since then. Turn it over, you could see the case back with a power reserve indicator and the underlying mechanism. Wind it up, and it has 6 days of power reserve. Note the satination of the wheels as well as the lever for the reserve and the engine turning on the base plate. Turn it over to the dial. You can see that the barrel bridge features striated Côte de Bethune. You can see black polished titanium in abundance surrounding the barrels. On top of the barrel bridge, you can see that the individual globes of the hour track are actually polished titanium. And then there is a bi-element moon phase, accurate to over 1,000 years down at the base, and that is 1/2 oxidized steel and 1/2 white palladium. A triple shock protection system with de Bethune's own balance and hairspring. There are no fewer than 6 patents protecting the technologies in this watch from an independent that is at the top of its game, making only 150 watches a year. This is, in my opinion, the best brand in the business for innovation, aesthetics, sensitivity to collectors' needs, willing to customize, ability to repair, replace, and upgrade, as well as exclusivity outright. No one comes close, in my estimation. This is a matter of opinion. You may disagree, but the bottom line is, I've experienced almost everything thousands of times, and nothing impresses me more than de Bethune. And this is the most impressive de Bethune I currently have in the collection. 44 millimeters in white gold, a 20-piece limited edition. This is the de Bethune DB28 Zodiac Tourbillon Deadbeat. Second mot avec le tourbillon. And you can see, this is a watch that features fully engraved yellow gold plaques, the entire zodiac, executed by Michel Rotin, the in-house engraver at de Bethune. You can also note that because they make every part of the watch, the case, the dial, and the movement, everything is to their house standards, starting with this dial. Inboard, it's rose lathe guilloche, traditional reductive guilloche cut on a rose lathe. Then you can see there's a power reserve indicator. This watch has a power reserve of 4 to 5 days when fully wound. You can see that the modified Breguet hands are in solid gold, and then there is a fired titanium seconds hand with a deadbeat action. Let's take a look at the zodiac track. You can see the fired blue titanium. You can see individual cabochons of white gold that have been placed by hand inside that track, and then the individually hand-engraved zodiac plaques representing the hours. More engraving, the inset crown, and then turn it all over, and you have a caliber of extraordinary beauty. You can see traditional mirrored anglage a mile wide on the edge of the barrel bridge, twin barrels, self-adjusting, and a unique double wheel system with a hairspring and 2 pallets. This is the deadbeat second system on the underside. The watch has 2 heartbeats. One is the deadbeat second, 1 beat per second. The other is going to be 5 beats per second, or I should say 10 beats per second, 5 hertz. So that's just like the Zenith El Primero, which has the high beat escapement, only here, not only is it 36,000 vibrations per hour, or 10 beats per second, but there is also a 30-second tourbillon. Look at the tourbillon moving at twice the speed of a standard tourbillon. Underneath that, their own hairspring, their own silicon and white gold balance, their own frictionless, or I should say low friction, silicon-based escapement, and all of this with glorious, broad, luminous Côte de Béton and black polished screws with blued titanium, and that escape wheel at the middle that activates the deadbeat second is made of solid gold. This is as good as it gets, folks. And if I could take just one watch from the show, it would be this one. If I could have just one watch for the rest of my life, I'd have to seriously consider making this it. Craft art and engineering all in one from the best in the business, a 20-piece limited edition from 2015. Guys, remember, reach out to me, tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing questions regarding any watches you see here. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.